I'm going to tell you a quick story about how Spotify and the major record labels are ruining music. They're ruining music for artists. They're ruining it for listeners. They're ruining it for everybody that isn't making money off of Spotify. My name's David. I'm an independent artist. I'm a songwriter living in Los Angeles. I'm going to tell you this story about how I got caught up in Spotify's production music scandal and what that means and how it bodes not so well for the future, especially with the rise of AI. So, come with me. It's 2020. What a wonderful time. We're in the midst of the pandemic. A friend hits me up with an offer for $300 writing the melody and words, the top line, for a track that he's made for Capitol Studio Masters, which is some subsidiary of Capitol Records, which is itself a subsidiary of Universal Music Group, which is one of the three major record labels that together, the three of them, combine to own 70% of the market share of all recorded music in America. They also, together, signed these carbon copy deals with Spotify when Spotify was first becoming a thing to license all of their music to Spotify. They basically all colluded and said, all right, if you want our music, you're going to have to give us a very sweetheart deal and equity in your company. So the three major labels all own a healthy percentage of Spotify. For me, the independent artist, very non-exciting. Let me explain. We were told we were going to make what's called library music. Essentially, songs that Universal, Capitol, whatever you want to call them, Scheinhardt Wig Company, if they could pay us a little bit of money up front, $600 to them is nothing, but then they get to maintain the rights to the song, meaning they can use it whenever they want. They don't have to pay an artist royalties for it, nor do they have to go through the administrative process of clearing the licenses. So they were just looking for easy, soulless background music, something they could put in a corporate training video or whatever. They send me over the track, a playlist. They wanted retro soul, so Mayer Hawthorne, Sharon Jones, Leon Bridges, but not the good stuff. Kind of cheesy white people music. And they said, make something that sounds exactly like that. This is my favorite part. The title of the compilation record is called Soul Revived, and there's literally a tagline on it. It says, Soul Revived, revive your soul. I wish that was AI that did that, but this was back in 2020. That was a human being. Give that as an example of how much creativity actually went into this project, okay? The song itself, I would describe it kindly as embarrassingly fine. It's got a nice Carlton kind of groove. It's 2 minutes and 15 seconds, in, out, over with. Basically, if you trained an AI on the music they play at Target, this is what you'd get. I wrote the lyrics in about 45 minutes. I recorded them on a cheap microphone in my bedroom. I was probably a little bit high. Maybe I finally got one over on the industry. Nope. They put the song out under my name. I then emailed my contact saying, hey, I really don't want this in my Spotify catalog. I think it's lame. They ignored me. But fine, it sort of sat at the bottom of my discography for years. Nobody was listening to it. Nobody was adding it to playlists, saving it, engaging with it. Then all of a sudden, it's 2024 and this funny thing happens. It starts blowing up. And when I look, it's not like people are seeking it out or listening to it. As a matter of fact, it still has no saves, no playlist ads, no repeat listens, nada. It's just getting a ton of Spotify algorithmic playlist streams. And when I dig in a little bit deeper, I can see that it's not like Discover Weekly or your daily mix or one of these mood playlists they're showing you. It's just Spotify Radio. Spotify Radio is what happens when you just let Spotify run endlessly, aka the most passive, least intentional music listening experience that you could find. When you're not paying attention, they start sneaking this thing in. More frustrating was the fact that at this point in time, I'm also releasing songs from a record that I spent 2.5 years making, that I love and care about and very much was trying to promote. I made it in a professional studio. I made it with a Grammy-nominated producer. I made it with some of literally the best musicians in the world. And it was made with intention and with a sense of wanting to communicate something, to make other people, listeners, feel something, think, shift something inside of them. I was trying to make art, you know what I mean? There was all sorts of validation saying, people like these songs, people were saving them, people were adding them to their own personal playlists, people were listening to them repeatedly. Stuff that should tell the algorithm, hey, serve it to other folks, but they didn't. And slowly but surely, Chance on Me, that cheesy knockoff song I made, became my top played song on Spotify, despite actively releasing new music. I was very mad and confused by that at first, but turns out I soon discovered this was not some mistake. This is Spotify's corporate strategy. Because what I soon learned, thanks to some crack reporting by investigative journalist Liz Pelly, she wrote a long expose in Harper's and has now actually published a book about this. Essentially, what Spotify was doing, or potentially still doing, paying these sort of faceless, shady shell companies, these production companies that are subsidiaries of another subsidiary of another subsidiary. They're paying the production company to then hire musicians, send them a playlist of songs to artlessly imitate, pay them a few $100 in order to retain the rights to the song. Sounding familiar? And Spotify called these songs perfect fit content, as in it was a perfect fit for their algorithm. Instead of playing art made by artists, Spotify could play the songs that these production companies made. But here's the kicker. Turns out if you trace the lines between these production companies, they're actually all owned by Spotify. So Spotify is paying itself, and Spotify was pressuring their editors' employees to make the algorithms prioritize these perfect fit content songs over real art. In other words, Spotify is actively replacing art with generic knockoffs in order to cut costs and pay themselves. And now that's not the end of the story, because it gets worse. This was 2020. Generative AI was not a thing back then. Not only is generative AI a thing now, all 3 major record labels have signed licensing agreements with generative AI companies, and they've taken equity in those generative AI companies. So while Spotify is not technically a party to these agreements, Spotify is partially owned by the record labels, who also partially own the generative AI companies, and Spotify has done basically nothing to signal that it has any interest in combating the rise of AI music. Why not? Because AI music reduces Spotify's costs. AI music boosts Spotify's profits. Spotify's primary incentive is not to serve you music. Spotify's incentive is to keep you on their platform, i.e. they'd rather feed you inoffensive drivel that they know you maybe just aren't paying enough attention to so you won't turn it off, than, art that might blow your mind. This means more generic music. This means music that doesn't challenge anything. This means music that is overly familiar, easy, simple, derivative, elevator music. Muzak. They think we're sheep. They think we won't notice. And the sad truth is that we've been doing this for a better part of a decade and not really paying attention to it. They recommend us whatever's easy to passively consume. They bury us in what we're familiar with. They prioritize older songs that we already know, that we aren't going to complain about, and they just serve us whatever's generic enough to not make us hit skip. They're smushing our tastes, and we're just kind of going along with it. It's only going to get worse, you guys. At least when I wrote that generic knockoff retro soul tune, they paid me $300. That's going away. We're going to have fewer opportunities to make money. There's going to just be less space for us to actually break through. And the ones that are going to actually break through are probably only going to be corporate controlled. And more so, there's just going to be less music that actually challenges expectations, breaks the rules, pushes new directions. Ask yourself, would David Bowie and his bisexual avant-garde art rock have made it onto your Spotify daily mix if he were just coming up today? What about Parliament, Patti Smith, Public Enemy? Literally anything that challenges the status quo or rocks the boat. Why would they serve that to you? Especially if it's weird, new, different, not like what everything else sounds like. They've got no incentive to do that. And for our society at large, what that means is we're not just going to lose our ability to discern between human and AI. We're pretty much there already. But more importantly, what we're going to lose is the difference between generic and intentional. In other words, we're going to lose art. We're going to be left just with diversion. Something nice and easy to put on. Bland sonic wallpaper that you're not going to notice because you're just trying to drown out whatever things are running through your psyche thanks to the other social media platforms. A nice colorless existence brought to you by Spotify. But look, there is something we can do about it. We can stop using Spotify. We can put pressure on them and tell them that we don't want AI slop. We don't want generic nonsense. Because the truth is there are real competitors now. While Spotify was kind of the one big only thing, there's now a whole bunch of different ways that you can stream music, get curated playlists, find cool mood-based playlists. I put a link below in the description with a bunch of different recommendations. Streamers that do exactly what Spotify does, just better. Higher audio quality, better recommendation engines, clear stances against AI music. If we put some pressure on Spotify, they might change. If we don't, They're going to keep giving us slop, running ICE ads, investing their profits into AI war technology, raising their prices for the third time in less than 3 years. We can do better, you guys. I'm going to make another video in a couple of weeks when I've done testing out all of these other streaming sites, but I'd love to hear if you have opinions. Screw Spotify. Music's too important.
Why do I behave this way? I swear the shit that I say is forbidden, but I don't need to be forgiven, cause the bubble I'm living in isn't bursting today.